Dororo, directed by Furuhashi Kazuhiro, 2019, is a 24-episode anime series based on the 1967 manga of the same name by Tezuka Osamu. Produced by the studios MAPPA and Tezuka Productions, it's an entry in an ongoing effort by Osamu's son, Tezuka Makoto, and Tezuka Productions in general to remake, add to, and complete works written by his father. For skeptics of nepotism and nostalgia-based marketing, this might sound like an empty cash grab, and the remake train definitely is an impending doom upon the anime industry as it's bombarded with expansion and overproduction. But as is the case in any film or TV industry plagued by corporate overlords, sometimes good stuff still makes it out. I sincerely find this to be a great series that updates the title for a new audience. It's not as interested in just repackaging a famous series with a glossy new art style as it is in creating a compelling story based on the inventive premise and evergreen themes of its namesake. That said, at the time of this writing, the second season hasn't been released, and for all I know, it'll be garbage. So, what's Dororo 2019 all about? Dororo tells the tale of a feudal lord who, in search of a solution to his province's calamity, offers his son to 12 demons. The demons accept his offer, each taking from the child a part of his body, leaving it skinless, limbless, and with its only sense being an ability to see souls. The child is left to die by its father, but in a turn of luck, or perhaps fate, is rescued and raised by a prosthetic maker named Jukai. He is given the name Hyakimaru, and in time discovers that with each of the 12 demons slain, he regains a piece of his body. While embarked upon his quest to rid the land of evil spirits, he encounters a young thief named Dororo, who then follows him on his travels. There are a plethora of manga centered around demon hunting and the value of the friends we met along the way. But this show is also about understanding the responsibility we have to humanity at large. It pits protagonists abused and excluded by the establishment against the agents of said establishment. Hyakimaru is a walking allegory of the cave. At the start of the series, he's childlike, with the only thing to color his understanding of the world being his conflict with demons. But with each addition to his senses, his literal perception of the world broadens. So the question becomes, what kind of person will he be when he's physically whole? Throughout the series, Hyakimaru's encounters introduce him to a new facet of humanity, be they positive or negative. The selfless caretaker of orphans, the samurai who murder her, the spirit who comes to love human, the human who sacrifices people to demons, even his father figure, a repentant soul with a violent past. Each of these little stories shape Hyakimaru's understanding of morality, and after the killing of men leaves a stain upon his soul, it's apparent that his relationship to violence is the central complication to his development. His biggest challenge comes in the discovery that regaining his body breaches the demon's pact with his father, Kagemitsu Daigo. Thus, with each demon slain, the land suffers in response. Even in his desire to restore himself, there's no purely righteous way forward. The quest naturally puts him at odds with Daigo, and soon enough, Hyakimaru becomes an official enemy of the state. So, even in attempting to restore the body that was stripped away from him, he has to weigh the value of potentially killing the people who stand in his way, as well as hurting the citizens under their dominion. The most literal obstacle on Hyakimaru's road to humanity comes in the form of his younger brother. Tahomaru, the second son born to Daigo, was raised as his heir, given the life that was meant for Hyakimaru, but continually feels a distance between himself and his place as the next lord. Upon discovering his brother's existence, Tahomaru is appalled by his father's actions, but ultimately decides to defend the sacrifice for the prosperity of the land. As Hyakimaru slays demons to reclaim his life, Tahomaru takes up the task of slaying his brother. And the same question will be asked of Tahomaru. To what means will he be willing to sink? And is the goal of restoring peace through the reign of demons the lesser evil? There's nobility in his willingness to accept his responsibility as a lord in this way, but in addition to conflating this task with some measure of his right to rule, he is also unable to see a perspective outside of a lord's bubble. What ultimately settles this dilemma, however, is defining what exactly prosperity for one province by a lord's design really means. The pact clearly allows the natural resources of the land to flourish. Ample rainfall, no floods, crop yields stay high. It also allowed Daigo to win his war against another territory. But while his castle stands high and his heir lives comfortably, the common people don't share in that wealth. In addition to allowing his 12 demons to prey upon the citizenry freely, we continually see people who still suffer from poverty and abuse by the government. the orphan caretaker Mio's selflessness is admirable, but the fact that these children have to rely on a random woman's kindness, while the so-called prosperous government gives them nothing, is telling. And the fact that this same woman must turn to sex work with military men to buy food, only to be unable to save any of them from those same soldiers later, again begs the question: prosperity for whom? Dororo's mother was unable to subsist on what charity the government offered. The disappearances in the mining town were the work of a man helping its citizens escape the grueling, highly fatal conditions they were forced to work under. And the border of Daigo's territory is viciously maintained by one of the 12 demons itself, feeding indiscriminately upon trespassers as soldiers tie them to the wall. Of course, this doesn't eliminate the potential for Hyakimaru to lose himself to nothing but a vengeance quest either, because, like I said, means matter just as much as the ends. Rather, what saves Hyakimaru from emerging as a monster is the valued human connections that he makes. Time and again, it's his bond to Dororo that pulls him from the brink, and the impacts of love and kindness that inform him what life is about.
So, 一人だ。わしにはそれが違う。
To be the next lord is Hyakimaru's birthright, but he just wants to live freely and not be hunted. In the end, he does slay all of the demons, but spares his father and brother, and journeys off away from the province. It's not clear what's next for him, but it's possible, now that his body and soul are whole, to live on his own terms, as long as it adheres to his debt to the world around him. And of course, we do know he'll return to his found family one day. Dororo's story even more directly antagonizes the establishment. He's descended not from royalty, but bandits. His parents' group made a point to only target samurai, as they believed the feudal government was immoral and did nothing for the peasants. So they built their own community, and focused their aggression on their oppressors, the military class who enforce subjugation of the lower castes and defends feudal sovereignty. Unfortunately, they met their end when Itachi, one of their members, laid a trap for them in exchange for class standing as a samurai. Afterward, Dororo lived in poverty with his mother until eventually she died of starvation. She did, however, reveal to him the location of a treasure trove meant to be his inheritance, having no choice but to tattoo the map onto his back. In her last moments, she tells him that he'd know what to do with the money when he meets somebody he trusts. As he doesn't understand her meaning, he resigns to delay his search, instead trying to get by as the house's thief we're introduced to him as. But after Itachi tracks him down, Dororo is forced to uncover the treasure and confront his family legacy. Multiple times in the series, Dororo exhibits particular shame or secrecy around his naked body, but when Itachi strips Dororo's clothes to reveal the map tattooed on his back, it's explicitly stated that he has a... I should mention that the manga treats this reveal as womanhood being his true gender, but 2019 handles it pretty well. The only people to call him a girl are Itachi at the moment that he strips his clothes, and a nurse who takes care of him while he's ill. Hyakimaru doesn't react to that news either. I don't think this show fully attempts to condemn gender binaries, but I do think there's value in the fact that Dororo remains constant in his gender identity after making peace with his past. It's implied that his parents raised him as a boy to protect him, and there are moments that describe him with more feminine terms, but he never says that himself. He says he's a boy after his parents die, and he stays a boy after his run-in with Itachi. There is the final sequence of the show where he more closely resembles his mom, but even if this is him living as a woman, I feel safe saying at the least he has some gender fluidity. Itachi is the class traitor to complement the class enemies of Daigo and Tahomaru. Itachi's greed led him to a false belief that he could ascend class status. He forgot the lives lost to the samurai and instead used his earnings, made in spite of the system, to buy into it. Eventually, Itachi was faced with the fact that his life was still disposable to the ruling class, and after being sent to his death as a mere distraction, abandoned his post. He then formed a new group of bandits circling right back to where he started, and learning the truth that Dororo's father had lived by all too late. Itachi dies trying just to see the treasure, and it would have been easy to make him a straight-up villain. Instead, Dororo takes pity on him for the disgrace he now lives in, even if he only came to admit his decision was the wrong one at the cost of his comrades' lives. And again, the real villain of this land, the Imperial government, appears to attack them, only after our protagonists have had a run-in with one of the 12 demons, of course. But this experience does teach Dororo that his treasure is not just a powerful tool, but a responsibility. and one that'd be poorly spent on personal gain. In a fully realized take on his rejection of the shogunate, Dororo decides to use his wealth to fund an independent, non-militarized city.
民が自分たちの国を自らの手で作るか。そこに思い至らなかったのは、所詮侍側だからだろうかね。
He moves forward from his tragic past and applies the gifts, both physical and intellectual, that his parents passed down to him, in order to forge a life of his own, one that prioritizes harmony with the natural world and seeks to effect change for the betterment of mankind as a collective. Tezuka's work frequently expressed these humanist anti-war sentiments, and the recurring motifs of body modification and transformation are interesting. Of course, that's not to say that all his politics were progressive, even by post-war era standards. The Dororo manga is exemplary of a pretty conservative stance on gender. But the creator's willingness to revise the source material helps elevate it, not just by adapting to more modern sensibilities, but also by developing some of the subtext even further than the original dared or even intended. That's not to discredit Tezuka's prolific career, but living up to that name requires more than fan service. Full honesty, I'm worried Season 2 will take a shit on all of this, but Dororo's vision of a city without a government sounds like an anarchist commune to me, so